What is up, guys? Alright, I've been tagged by ETA Nick. Thank you, Mr. Nick. I appreciate the tag. What the tag is, as I'm sure you'll know by now, probably by the title I give this video, is my 5 top favorite storylines, which I really appreciate Nick giving to me in particular as a tag, because I don't know if this is why you did this or not, Nick. Maybe I'm just reaching, giving you the benefit of the doubt, or hoping maybe for my own sake. But writing, unlike some other people, I think most people like comic books for the art, and I obviously love the art, as you guys probably know, if you watch my Inside the Covers or Beyond the Covers videos. But aside from the art, I actually prefer the writing, and that's what gets me most excited about comic books, is not the art, but great writing. And so when I saw that I was tagged by ETA Nick for my top 5 favorite storylines in comic books, I said, oh me, oh my, I got to make a video today. I have to. You know what I mean? So, I'll confess, I didn't want to leave certain things out, so I spent this is so dorky, but I spent 30 minutes thinking about it, and I even wrote notes for myself down here below the camera. There's notes that I have for myself. I think it sucks just to read notes. This is not a homework assignment, but I care so much about the art of storytelling, and I respect so much the craft of comics as far as the medium that it provides for creators. You know, comics these days is a little bit different, but historically, comics is the place where, you know, I hate to say this, but comics is the place where the bad artists go, guys. It's the place where the guys go, at least in the mind of the populace. It's the place where the guys go who want to make a living doing their art. They're selling out, so to speak, by doing art for children. There's very little room for them to be creative as far as doing abstract art or whatever you want to think of as eccentric types of art. And so by the majority of the creative world, comics have for a long time been looked down on. And, you know, not just the comics have I'm getting totally off track here. Holy crap. This has nothing to do with the tag video. What am I doing? Anyways, for a long time, I'm just going to keep going here. Part of the reason is it's hot as hell, and the only way I could deal with the heat was by pouring myself a glass of whiskey. So, don't worry, Nick. I'm not drinking and bidding, just YouTubing and drinking. Alright, I'm going to get right to it, okay? My top 5 favorite storylines. And I take these way too seriously, to be honest. There's a reason why I decided to call myself the comics preacher. I preach these to my friends, and they're sick of me talking to them about it. So I'll talk to you about them now instead. Okay, X-Men is where it all started for me as a kid, as far as the comic world goes. And so one run I have to consider one storyline, and I don't know if you would consider this one story arc, but I kind of consider it just I bulk it as one thing, is Giant Size X-Men #1 up through X-Men 95. So that includes 94 as well. And the reason why I stop at 95 is because that's kind of the end of their first real mission as a new team with Thunderbird when he dies. And it's when you first have a feel for the fact that there's going to be a continuity to this new team of X-Men. And although it's Len Wein who starts off in the beginning in Giant Size X-Men #1 with the writing, Chris Claremont takes over immediately, I think, or maybe they split the duties in 94, but relatively quickly Claremont is taking over, and as we all know, Claremont does in the Bronze Age for X-Men what no one else could do. And for me, probably because of Wolverine growing up in the 90s as a teenager, that's what got me into X-Men, to be honest. But the more I learn about them, the deeper I go, the more I like. The family dynamic and all that, it's why I like the Fantastic Four as well. Marvel does it best with combining superheroes into one comic magazine, and I think they did it fantastically in the Bronze Age with X-Men, as many do. It's not a surprise pick, right? Okay. You know, he also basically, the thing, it's hard because I'm kind of combining two things. There's the Claremont setup, and then there's the Len Wein deal with Giant Size X-Men #1, right? Len Wein did something, I don't really like Len Wein's writing for the most part, but in Giant Size X-Men #1, he did something amazing. He created an epic, wide in scope story if you haven't read Giant Size X-Men #1 lately, you should take it. You should reread it, because not only is it an expensive key book, but it is just a fantastic piece of creativity. A fantastic piece of creativity. It really is. I mean, Len Wein just revamps, is not even giving him justice. Takes the old X-Men team, the old idea of what the X-Men comic strip was about, and just brings it into the Bronze Age, blazing, as Dr. Von Chilla likes to say. Blazing, sir. Yes. And he has some artists to help him along the way, of course. But, all right, I'll move off of that. The one I'm going to count as number 2 is also an X-Men storyline. It's the introduction of the Sentinels. So starting with issue number 14 through issue number 16 is, I think, where the 3-part storyline ends. It's a three comics into one storyline. That, starting with X-Men number 14, what that does with the introduction of the Sentinels and Oliver Trask, Dr. Oliver Trask, if you're not, or Oliver or Bolivar, I always forget. Anyways, Trask. The guy who creates the Sentinels, and they turn on him and the whole thing. But aside from the Sentinels being fantastic and one of the best artificial intelligence type of villains I've ever seen, there's the whole issue of mutants being brought up in X-Men number 14. And it's brought up beforehand, but it's really fleshed out for the first time in X-Men number 14. And the X-Men comic book in the Silver Age at that point established itself as the comic book for Marvel that would deal with topics like discrimination, racism, sexism, etc. The X-Men, especially in the beginning, guys, were all about how these mutants, these weren't people who inherited their powers by some accident, like Spider-Man, who got bit by a radioactive spider, or Bruce Banner, who became the Hulk through radioactive exposure, or the Fantastic Four, who went up into space and cosmic rays created them into something else. Those heroes that began the Silver Age of Marvel, which was the greatness, were all humans, and they became something else. But the X-Men were born different, and that made them much more analogous to those who felt ostracized in society at the time. People like racial minorities, basically anybody who's disadvantaged. Females even, I bet, could identify with a lot of the X-Men comic strips back then more than most, although there's a lot of male chauvinism in it, because it was the 60s. Maybe that's a bad example, but basically the X-Men became the home for those who are different. And the morals of their stories were often dealing with trying to fit in as somebody different. Claremont continued that later on once he got through with the Phoenix Saga. He brought that back kind of into more of the central storyline in the X-Men plot. But I've gone too long, and that's, I think, I haven't looked at my notes this whole time, which is pretty fantastic, but I think that's what I wanted to basically say. Yeah, okay. I'm going to go quicker here. The next 2 that I have, and then I'm going to finish off with one big bang, are both Frank Miller hits. Dark Knight Rises. Dark Knight Rises? Dark Knight Returns. I was just watching Dark Knight Rises on TV. Shit. Oh, yeah. One of my favorite comic storylines is one that I forgot the name of. No, but Batman Dark Knight Returns. I don't really know where to start with that, okay? There are so many things fantastic about it, but if I had to pick one thing to try to speed this up that's fantastic about that storyline, is what it did for the character of Batman. ETA Nick has kind of taught me a little bit about the history of Batman more than most, along with Tech 31 Kid, if I have to be fair. And, pre-Robin Batman, guys, so that'd be pre-Detective Comics 38, I think, is the first appearance of Robin. I'm off by 1 or 2 maybe, but it's around there. There's 10 issues of Detective Comics in the very beginning, starting with Detective Comics 27, with the first appearance of Batman, where Batman was a very different character from who he became once they introduced Robin, and that had to do with the audience that they were writing for. In the beginning, they were writing for a more adult audience. He was a darker character. He was a lot more gritty. It was more about detective crime sort of feel to the story. Once they introduced Robin, they were writing for the kids. And it became more of a flashy superhero thing almost instantaneously. And then, of course, that led into Silver Age Batman, which is just a freaking disaster. But Dark Knight Rises, the reason why I'm talking about the past is because Dark Knight Rises was the first time for me where when I read the story, I feel what I love about the Batman that I've come to know. It's that dark, gritty character that he started out with. That's where they started. And I feel like they got off track for about the better part of 50 years until Batman returned again with Frank Miller to where he started off. And I think many of us identify with that type of Batman. Maybe not identify, but love that type of Batman. That's what made Batman famous in the movies, obviously. They ran with the Frank Miller version of the Dark Batman, right? A far cry from the Silver Age stuff, and I love Frank Miller for doing that. Also, just a great storyline. Fantastic storyline. Same thing that Frank Miller did with, I'm not going to even try to group it into Born Again or one or the other, but all of his Daredevil issues. That's going to be my number 4, guys. Is every Frank Miller Daredevil issue, starting from issue where you start 150. Darn it, I even have that comic. It's 158, I think, something like that. Could be off. But wherever he started from, all the way up, he took a break around the 200s, but then he started again from 220-ish. He's got like 50 or 60 issues in Daredevil that are, to me, some of the best writing ever, not just in comics. I mean, that run, not only is it amazing to watch because you get to see his progression as an artist, and as an artist who's a storyteller as well, but you know what, I can't even get into it, to be honest, because I'm taking too much time. But just suffice to say that Batman Dark Knight Returns and Frank Miller on Daredevil are 2 cases where I think one artist did something amazing for the hero, which is brought him back to where, well, not with Daredevil, but brought him to a point where we could fall in love with him again as a gritty, dark hero that was suited for the times. It was the type of hero that we wanted, that we were kind of hungering for. Well, I wasn't alive then, but that society was hungering for. They didn't want this flashy Silver Age crap anymore. They wanted something more real. That's why Swamp Thing and Man Thing and all this kind of stuff took off around then. They're looking for something a little more, I don't know how to describe it, dark and gritty. And Frank Miller brought that back to some of our favorite comic book characters with Batman and Daredevil. Finally, I'm going to finish off, guys. Preacher. That's my number 5, Preacher. And I had the hardest time picking out my favorite storyline from Preacher, so to speak. So I'm going to say issues number 10 through 12, which are the issues where there's the first major climax in the writing of Preacher. Garth Ennis is the writer for Preacher. If you don't know who Garth Ennis is, check him out. He's one of my favorite writers. He is in your face. No bullshit. Questions, fine. I'm going to keep telling you my opinion regardless of what you have to say. I'll listen to you, and I'm going to give you an intelligent rhetoric, but I will not lay down for anybody with my opinion type of writing. And the thing I love most about Preacher is not just the fact that it's entertaining, and it is that. Oh, it is that. Believe me, guys. I think we're going to have a lot of fun when, what's-his-face, Seth Rogen, I can't believe it's Seth Rogen, but even though it's Seth Rogen, I think we're going to have a lot of fun when the series comes out on AMC, because there's a lot of good material in Preacher. It feels like you're reading Garth Ennis' virgin writing, even though I don't think it's his first. And it just feels like it's so chock full of amazing ideas and stories that he doesn't even have time to get into with the amount of pages that he has. And, he always leaves you wanting more. But that issues number 10 through 12 are where Jesse Custer goes to Masada, which is the center for the Christianity complex in this comic book strip. And one of the things I hate to say it, but one of the things I love most about Preacher is not just the fact that it's entertaining. I got sidetracked here. This is what I was about to say, but is also that it takes a strong, not an apologetic, a strong I don't want to say but questioning religion stance. Okay, and I realize that a lot of you guys are religious. Some of my close friends on YouTube are religious, but I do feel that. As somebody who's agnostic, I can't believe I'm getting religion into this video, but as somebody who's agnostic, I think that's part of the reason why I am as attracted to Preacher as I am, aside from the whole cowboy, kick-ass type feel of it, which I'm attracted to as well. I think one of the major reasons why it really sticks with me is that it takes a big stab at the modern view of religion, and it has fun, but also makes very serious statements about how religion has affected society historically, and how Christianity in particular, how can I put this without offending more people than I already have, how Christianity in particular has been a central part of Western society, and because of that, how Christianity has had a larger influence on the course of events throughout history than it should have, let's say, proportionately speaking. Okay, I'm not getting Da Vinci Code on your ass or something, but that's one of the main reasons why I like it. So, there it is. My top 5 favorite storylines. Looks like I did it in under 15 minutes, which is pretty good for me. Probably a long video for some, but that's pretty good for me. And there it is. Thanks for the tag, Mr. Nick. Later on, guys. Later on. I'm going to try to get cool because it's hot as hell.